coming up on This Week in Radio Tech. Shaun Dolan and Rob Bertrand. Now, they've both been guests on the show before, but now they work at the same place. Rob is now with Inrush Technologies, and Shaun is there too. And they're going to be talking about trends in broadcast engineering, the things that we as engineers need to know, and owners and operators need to know too, for getting more efficiency and more bang for your buck out of broadcast engineering, out of your facility. That's coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store, with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics, with the Bionics Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Air, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host, and once again, I am very pleased to report that I'm in Hawaii while the temperatures across the USA are really, really frigid. So it's great to be here. You've heard before, we did 2 shows from Hawaii last month, it was in December, and we purchased and are moving 8 radio stations from their old location into some brand new office facilities, and that's why I'm here. Russell Lafferty, my partner in crime here in engineering, has been here, and he's here also. He's not going to be on the show today. He's busy moving some things. Larry Fuss and Joey Cummings are here too. They're people that you've met on TWiRT in the past. But the show's not about me, not about this. This episode is about putting new technologies to work and knowing when people like you and me should be getting on the phone and talking to engineers who are really expert at getting some things done with new technology. And so therefore, I'm very pleased to bring you a couple people that you've actually met before, but not together on this show in the same context. So I'm bringing them together. We have, center stage, Rob Bertrand. And Rob, are you there? You got Rob on the
I
screen?
am here. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Oh, there we go. There's Rob Bertrand. Rob, I've known you for years. You've been at several radio stations in New York and Washington, D.C., and you've got a new job. Can you tell us about that real quick?
I do. I've joined Inrush Broadcast Solutions Inrush Broadcast Services as a partner. I will continue to live here in the DC area and take care of our clients on the East Coast and work to develop a greater presence in public media for the company, which has been my focus for the last 8 years. I too have known the Inrush folks from a distance for a bit, and as we got to know each other over the course of this past year, I think mutually became convinced that this would be a great fit. So I'm really excited to be coming aboard and uniting our forces.
Well, I'm no expert, but I think it is a great fit. I know some of the people at Inrush. I know you. And when I heard the news that you were going to go and partner up and go to work with Inrush, I thought, yes, that makes all the sense in the world. You are absolutely of the caliber that Inrush exhibits. So let's talk to that caliber, and that's Shaun Dolan. Shaun, former colleague of mine. So sad to see you go from Telos a few years ago, but delighted that you're doing so well at Inrush. Shaun Dolan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kirk, thanks for having me. It's fun to be back and be able to chat with you, and also on such a momentous occasion and being able to publicly announce, talking about being able to team up with Rob this week.
Shaun, if you would kind of give us a quick preview what we're going to be talking about today. You sent some great ideas to lead in today's show, and I like maybe it's going to be a show title: Broadcast Engineering Orchestra, Going Beyond the One-Man Band. And so many of us engineers just have this sense that we want to be a one-man band. We want to be the answer to everything. We want to know it all, do it all, and maybe be responsible for it all. It gives us a sense of pride and accomplishment, but it's not always, in this environment, the best idea. Shaun, maybe riff on that and tell us what we're going to be talking about in the show today.
Yes, we do. Myself included, very much thrive on being able to get things done and make things happen, and occasionally be able to move a mountains and be able to actually get a matchup between one skill set and a need. But that's kind of increasingly the problem. Is that the needs of the broadcast facility and broadcast operation are just becoming so diverse. And up until recently, it was certainly possible to have one person do it all. But as time has gone on, um, there's so much specialization required that it can be helpful to have some outside resources, be able to help you run your broadcast facility, bring in new technology. And it's also a lot of fun too to be able to work with like-minded people, and actually have some resources to be able to sort of surge up when needed, but also be able to adjust for those times in the facility when there's not a lot happening. Maybe there's not a lot of engineering budget for the year or whatnot. And instead of just sort of trying to keep yourself busy, or being tasked with perhaps non-engineering things that aren't a useful application of your time, to be able to go work on something else that's exciting, and then come back to the station when there's a need.
I bet Rob has experienced the same thing that I have. I'm pretty sure I'm about as old as both of you put together. But when I got started in broadcast engineering, the big stations maybe had multiple engineers, 5, 6 engineers, even for just like one Chicago AM station. There's one I'm thinking of, and a friend of mine, long lost acquaintance, was just one of 6 engineers at this one AM radio station. And then he moved to Florida, and he was with a big station there. They had a bunch of engineers. But then we went through the late 80s and through the 90s and consolidation, and it seems like the number of engineers dwindled. And then it got to the point where one engineer is the regional guy, and he might have an IT person or a couple of the people that can help out from time to time if they've got a real disaster. But so many engineers these days are running around between 10, 18, 20 radio stations. So, and I'm not really much different. I have a full-time job at Telos, but I also help take care of 21 radio stations. Thank goodness we've hired Russell Lafferty here. It's in a way, it's gotten to the point where it's very difficult for one person to know everything, to do it well, and to keep up with the new technology. And that's where I see companies like Inrush, and there's a few others out there. In fact, one of our sponsors, Josh Bone at Max Connect, they do some similar things. They'll come in and implement new equipment, new systems, help get things started, take care of it over time if you need to. So that's the kind of symphony of engineers that we're going to talk about, where people are effectively doing what they do best and doing what they know how to do, and what they're training and learning for themselves to do. Rob, with all that blah 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 in mind, that I've my little soliloquy there. Rob, I think your own broadcast experience has been fairly similar. I met you in New York. You went to Washington. You had a couple fewer engineers there, and now you're part of this orchestrated symphony team, right?
In New York, I was really fortunate to be part of when we were all consolidated under one roof at CBS, about 20 of us. And that was really remarkable. I was fortunate when I was just at WCBS 880 alone, and there were 3 of us down the street. And then I'd be remiss to not mention Chris Tobin, who was a peer and a great friend and a fantastic engineer, as you and this audience know very well. Chris was down the street at 888 7th Avenue, and we would often collaborate. It was kind of nice to be, even though we were small teams, we were able to walk down the street and help one another out. A little bit further down the road, we were under the same roof together. In fact, Chris and I, there was just a single wall between us in our 2 offices. And we had an incredible array of engineers at that time. And the business has just gone through a lot of change. As CBS got ready to say goodbye to its radio division, there were reductions throughout the company, as we've seen throughout the industry, and that team grew smaller. I came to DC, and we had a smaller team at WAMU, but it was also a very strong team. And in both cases, both in New York and DC, I could not help but think, we've got this really great group of people here. that took a lot of work to put together and took a lot of work to continue to grow, and put the right culture in place as a team so that we could all get together. You were talking about earlier on about how, as engineers, we're often kind of wired to be independent folks, and doing that level of collaboration where we're sharing ideas and really letting the best ideas win, not necessarily our own. Super hard thing to do when you're used to working on your own. And so if you've got a team of folks that are capable of doing that, I think it's so important to hang on to them, and use them to their fullest extent. I was so proud to have that in Washington and in New York. And I started down the path in 2024 of forming my own firm, with the idea of growing it and bringing additional people on. And I started having conversations with folks. And I had a client that I was doing some research for, and that engagement took me to Inrush to talk to them about what it was like being an integrator in the US, and installing some different systems. And we had some really great conversation. It was really the tip of the iceberg. And as time went on and our conversations increased and we started to talk about some different things, also had the experience of being by myself at a couple of transmitter sites in the middle of the night. And I just thought, man, in the middle of fields where nobody could hear you scream.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I haven't been here in a long time. I kind of miss people. And so as our conversations continued with Inrush, I thought, there's really a good match here, and there's something to be said if I'm going to get out there and preach what seems to be becoming my new talk about how we need to come together. Well, maybe I need to take a dose of my own medicine and be willing to not be my own person out in the wind, and come and effectively join an engineering tribe. And I think I found a really great group of like-minded people to partner with, and super excited for this next chapter in my life, and super excited for what we're going to be able to do on the whole for stations all around the country.
We're talking to Rob Bertrand and Shaun Dolan, now both of Inrush Technologies, and I'm Kirk Harnack. It's This Week in Radio Tech. I'm in Hawaii on the island of Maui. Delighted to be here. That great. And behind me, we're going to take this first quick commercial break. Behind me, you see a lot of computers back here. There's a couple of file servers down here, the blue boxes, and then there's a bunch of smaller computers up here. There's lots of different ways to run what we're running. What are we running? Playout One. Playout One. I'm so delighted that they are a sponsor now of This Week in Radio Tech. There's plenty of automation systems out there for radio. And a few years ago, I and my business partner, Larry Fuss, were trying several different ones, and we stumbled across Playout One. And we knew some other people who were using it, and they had nothing but good things to say about Playout One. It is a Windows-based automation system for radio, and it's so capable. I got to tell you, the remote web voice tracking, they call it WebVT, the remote web voice tracking is just awesome. Our remote talent, and they are all over the U.S. and in different places. We have a couple talent here in Hawaii that do web voice tracking. They love it. It's so easy for them to use. There's also an easy way for you to go live on Playout One. By the way, the web voice tracking, they got this really cool feature. Let's imagine that you're connected. It uses WebRTC to make that audio connection. You hear, the previous element. You talk. You do your liners. You talk about contests and things happening in the community, and you punch the button and you start the next item. You can talk over or not. It's up to you. Talk up to something if you like, and then you could, of course, slide those elements, adjust them if you didn't get it quite right. But here's what's cool: your voice is recorded locally on your local computer in the web browsing mechanism, and it's then sent up to the server here, the Playout One program. And so if there's a difficulty with the live transmission of WebRTC, and usually there's not, there's some error correction going on there, but your computers in the background automatically send your perfect local copy of the audio up to the Playout One system, and that is a huge benefit. There's lots of other cool things about Playout One. The CEO, Dave Brierley-Jones, is going to be joining us on some future episodes to give us some more tips about Playout One and what it can do. We've got 8 of them running right here behind me, and a couple of file servers, a main and a backup, and we love it. Thanks a lot, Playout One. It's a service of AIR, AIIR, air.com is that website, AIR.com. You can read about Playout One and all of its amazing features. Thanks, Playout One, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack here. Chris Tarr has the day off, apparently, and we're talking to Rob Bertrand and Shaun Dolan. And gentlemen, we've mentioned that fewer broadcast engineers are entering the field, and seasoned professionals are retiring. Plenty of them retiring. A lot of great knowledge, no longer being available, or maybe even going into other industries. So station owners really face increasing challenges due to reduced in-house engineering resources. This paradigm that you two have been talking about, we've kind of introduced. How can, I guess my big question about this, about bringing some experts in to get something done, to really improve things, how do you help a local engineer to get comfortable with this? And I got to tell you, even back 30 years ago, I myself had been brought into a station that had an engineer that was really struggling, and I had to have a very humble attitude that, hey, dude, it's not because you're not capable. You're overworked. You're overwhelmed. You got too much to do, and I'm just here to help. And I always was able to kind of work it out to make this other engineer, I was there helping because he wasn't getting the job done, to feel good about his own efforts and learn something at the same time. We would do a lot of things together. In fact, today here at this station, I worked with one of the disc jockeys who's not really excited about moving away from his old facility, and I just brought him in the one of the talk studios we're building, and we just talked for half an hour about where the furniture should go, what the sight lines should be, and I know he left feeling a lot better about his soon-to-be new home here. Okay, that's my perspective. Tell me your perspective about working with stations to get something done and how you handle those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Shaun, Rob, whoever wants to go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. I think it's one of those things where there's engineers we're friends with from the beginning. Local engineers, we'll say, that we're friends with from the beginning, and then there's local engineers that we become friends with by the end of the project. But it's very rare that one of those two things doesn't happen. Because ultimately, yeah, if there is someone locally, they are overworked. It's almost, it's never really a situation of they're like not getting the job done in any sort of sense that they have control of. It's just that there's a lot to do, and one person can't and shouldn't be expected to do it in a lot of cases. So, we end up becoming pretty close with local engineers. Depending on how long the engagement is and how long the project is, different degrees. But just not too long ago, a couple of our other partners actually, were invited out to across the country to basically one of our engineer friends' house that we had done a project for. That at the beginning of the project, things were a little bit dicey. By the end of it, great friends. Stayed in their house and partied with them and stuff. And it's really satisfying to be able to actually form some relationships and not have that situation where it's adversarial, because really it's not. We whether or not we were hired by them directly or not, we do work for them and we do work with them, and it's only going to make our job easier if they're comfortable with the systems that we're putting in, and it's only going to make the final product better if we take their insight, like you mentioned, some of the knowledge that they've built over time, both generically and in a specific facility. It's only going to make for a better project if we take that into account and really listen. So it becomes a thing where we're not even trying to make them feel good. It's just the actual outcome determines the actions we take, and it makes it just sort of naturally happen that we all get along either immediately or shortly thereafter.
Gotcha. Hear you. Rob, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I can speak from both sides. As the local engineer and the one delivering services. Certainly, as the local engineer, I can think of a number of people that I've worked with over the years who, you're like in a foxhole together. These projects tend to be pretty intense, and yeah, it could go one of two ways. Either you wind up, hating each other, or you become great friends. And really, there's no one that I've worked with on either side of the equation that I did not ultimately become friends with. In fact, while I was just visiting the crew in Chicago last week, came up that somebody who was a contractor a decade or so ago has found a permanent home in Chicago, and they actually deal with this person on a regular basis. And this person messaged me this past week saying, "Oh, I know all the people that you're working with now too because of Chicago." And I had said to them, "Yeah, there's not that many people that I've worked with in this business who have been in my house. He's one of them." And I think that goes to say a lot about the bonds that can be formed, and especially the long assignments that engineers can find themselves on as they go around the country and do these build outs. Now that I'm on this side of the equation, I think that one of the things that I've learned early on is just to be really sensitive to the idea that folks could feel some level of blame. Sometimes in some situations, like I really try to be very careful about the conversations that I have when we're not one on one. If there are others present, I want to make sure that if I'm there, that I'm pointing out all of the good things and the strengths that engineer has brought to the facility. And if we need to talk about how we might need to thread a needle a little bit differently, those are always conversations that we have one on one when there isn't a dynamic of somebody really feeling put on the spot. I think that that's one of those things that also helps to build trust between colleagues in a project situation. And I, having been on both sides of the equation, I know what it feels like. And I want to certainly make people feel good in those situations and, be able to deliver an outstanding project despite whatever, dynamics there might be between those of us who are there and those of us who are visiting. The final thing that I'll add is that unfortunately, increasingly, there are not engineers at stations. And so we are encountering situations where the folks at stations are just so grateful to have an engineer in the building that they're ecstatic to see us. And that is becoming more common.
Wow, I think you're exactly right. Good points all the way around. And I'll tell you what, we're going to talk about a little bit different topic now, and then kind of come back to this notion of where you do have engineers there, of being able to have the relationship where you're teaching them, and they can, if they're interested in increasing their own skill set, they have the stepping stones of your work at a station that you were hired to do to help them step up and increase their own skill set, perhaps to take care of what you've done or to improve it further. Let's talk about scaling the work that specialists like you guys do for either smaller operators or larger operators. Stations that are kind of the size of the ones that I'm part owner in, we really tend to think that we can't afford to hire people to come in. We kind of depend on me and another engineer to get up to speed on whatever it is, on the best technology that we can implement at the time. And fortunately, I'm so far from perfect, but I do enjoy learning, and I like to learn on my own time. I learn about VoIP, SIP, and VoIP processes, and learn. Of course, we're all interested. Most of us are interested in operating systems and that how to make Windows walk and talk and sing and dance, and then how to do networking and what are some good practices and what are things that we need to avoid or improve. So, on this topic of small operators, the challenge there: limited budgets, limited resources, but there's things that you can bring to the table in terms of technology to really improve their operation. And I take one more second before you guys speak to this. Here in Hawaii, the stations that we bought, the previous owner has been paying for a number of really expensive services that we don't use, we feel weren't necessary. And he was paying for something like 16 POTS phone lines. That's, I think he's paying $1,200 to $1,500 per month for POTS phone lines. One of them went to a transmitter site where nothing was connected to it. Now, I realize when you get up in years, you've run the station the same way, you may lose track of these expenses, and you may think they're all just kind of normal. But some fresh eyes brought in can really look to save you some money, either through cutting services that you're not using or don't need, doing audits like that, or using different technology that indeed costs a lot less. So let me turn it over to you guys. How do you help smaller companies to find value in what you can do for them?
Yeah, well, to Rob's point about sort of being sensitive to those group dynamics, it is totally understandable to lose track of things over time. And like we're saying, there's just not enough time to go around at a certain point. And so that's the exact reason for somebody like us to come in. And it doesn't really make a difference to us whether or not we're the ones presenting the cost saving necessarily. So, typically we would, in that case, try and bring it to the engineer, one to ask, hey, doesn't appear to be in use. Can we kill this off? And then two, if they have any desire to, have the win or be able to present this to their bosses, ultimately they're the ones that are going to be there after we leave. And so, what is it to us to be the ones to deliver that news? However, for smaller operators that are kind of budget constricted, that's typically where we'll look first is, where can we cut without really any compromise at all. And that helps build the case that we actually can deliver some value, and also simultaneously take those savings and turn them into a project that's actually going to help further the station's technological infrastructure in some way. So, we understand that smaller stations have tighter budgets, and so when we say or recommend during the yearly budgeting process uh, these three projects, we actually need to explain, one, if we can help pay for them in some fashion by being more efficient with how they're spending in some areas, but then also make the business case for it and actually show them what the ROI might be over time and propose to them, what the cost might be in both time and parts for something like maintaining a legacy transmitter.
Mm-hmm.
That the model for this sort of collective engineering uh, necessarily means that there may not be someone on site, and the cost to sort of get someone out there is relatively high. So we have to focus on how do we make those surprise trips unnecessary.
Rob, I've only met you in terms of in context of big radio stations with big budgets. Have you worked in smaller market radio, Rob?
I have. I started my career in New Jersey with Greater Media. Now, what was really wonderful about Greater Media is that there were no small markets in Greater Media. They, even though we were in suburban New Jersey, they really gave us the same resources that were available in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
and Detroit, and Boston, and I was really super grateful for that. But I'll mention that when I came to WAMU in Washington from New York, the biggest thing that I think I brought was perspective. If you're just a single station, particularly a single public station, you know what you know about your station. And you know what you see on the floor of NAB or at the Public Radio Engineering Conference. And so I came in and learned that we were paying over $36,000 a year for our automation system, just for support. And it was not really going super well. I said, well, that's an exceptional amount of money to be paying for an automation system. We could do lots of things with that money. And the reaction was, really? Is that out of line? I said, it's abnormal. I don't know a lot of stations that are paying that for support for one station's automation system license. And so we're able to open the door there to more possibilities. And I can see more opportunities like that as we're able to deliver scale for stations that otherwise wouldn't have contact with scale. Because the scale isn't just about bringing bigger solutions, it's about bringing broader perspective. Being able to say, hey, well, we've worked with these very small clients, we've worked with these very large clients, these medium-sized clients, you kind of align somewhere in here. And, here's what we've learned from deploying these different solutions. In some cases, I think it's about aligning with the reality on the ground as well. So I had one client recently who had an audio over IP plant, and they were using IP drivers for all of their PCs. They no longer had a full-time engineer. Actually, no longer had any engineer at all. I was there to fill that need on the project basis. And I wound up taking a particularly problematic machine that had a lot of people touching it, and so therefore it would develop different problems and often needed to be switched out. And I installed a USB audio interface that was driverless. And I happened to speak with a former engineer. He's like, well, why would you go to an analog, USB interface as opposed to an audio over IP driver? And I said, because the program director can unplug that PC and plug a new one in, and he doesn't need to know anything. I think that when you're able to kind of zoom out and say, it's not just about like, hey, we can do away with the concept of an audio card because we as engineers believe that is, the best way to go. And certainly if you're able to support that, sure. But being able to zoom out and say, well, here's the reality. This plant was built with these expectations. Well, those expectations are no longer reality. What do we need to do to deliver the most workable solution for what the day-to-day reality is going to be for this station going forward, which may look different than it did in the past. You talked about those 16 POTS lines. I can only imagine, what solution you might have deployed there, but it certainly wasn't another 16 POTS line.
Exactly.
And I think that this is the biggest thing that we bring is perspective and the ability to scale up and scale down depending on what an individual station is.
Rob Bertrand and Shaun Dolan are our guests today on This Week in Radio Tech. We're trying to understand some of this new idea, new to a lot of people, of bringing experts in to do something, to consult, to get engineering done, because we have so few engineers and we're overworked. And I'm going to, after this commercial break, mention about how engineers and maybe more importantly, radio station owners and operators can be motivated to find out about what else is out there. What am I doing that's not efficient? And I got a quick little story about that coming up. I'm Kirk Harnack. I'm in Hawaii on the island of Maui. We're here at the new Akamai Broadcasting Company, where we have 8 radio stations here running behind me, and we'll get into that more on another show. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics, where they are full of great ideas that make engineers like us look really good to the talent and to the ownership when things start going really well on the air with great content. Let's check it out from Broadcast Bionics.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These could be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
Broadcast Bionics, these guys are great and they understand broadcast. And guess what? All their products get tested out in like London, England, which is a really big radio market, very active. So check them out at bionics.co.uk. Love these folks. Thank you for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack. It is, we're recording this on Wednesday, January 22nd, and you're going to be watching this on Thursday, January 23rd, and it just worked out that way. I'm so delighted that Rob Bertrand and Shaun Dolan agreed on short notice to be my guests here, and we're talking about really some important things for engineers and for station owners. What I wanted to begin this next little topic about teaching opportunities in modern broadcast is it seems to me that one of the biggest drivers of radio stations and station groups moving to the next level in efficiency of operation, in better technical operation, maybe you might say just a better excellence in operation. One of the things that I have seen happen over and over is when station owners, operators, sales managers, engineers get together and talk to each other, maybe in the context of a state broadcast association at a convention. Maybe they're sharing ideas on how to be successful. Not too many stations are part of the International Broadcasters Idea Bank. I'm very fortunate that my business partner, Larry Fuss, is a member of the Idea Bank, and these guys get together twice a year and really talk about what works for them, what doesn't work for them in terms of sales technique, management technique, technologies, and they spend 2 or 3 days at their twice a year conventions talking about these things. And a lot of the ideas that we've implemented at our stations came from meeting with other station group owners at the Idea Bank, and you can get a lot of the same ideas and information and sharing of success stories in the context of a state association or the NAB, or if you're an engineer in the SBE, find out what's working well for other people. So that brings up the opportunities for teaching, for sharing new and good and efficient information with others, and that's what I'd like Shaun and Rob to talk about at this point. Shaun, did you want to talk about teaching opportunities and maybe even include this idea of mentorship at Inrush in the sharing of knowledge?
Well, you mentioned Idea Bank specifically, and we have enjoyed going to the Idea Bank conventions and getting to meet people and talking to people. For the past few events, I was at the one in the Ozarks recently, and got to chat with Larry and actually your new engineer there, Russell, maybe.
Yeah, he went.
Okay, yeah. So that's quite a nice opportunity, and it's a unique one too because there's besides like Russell, there may have been a couple others, but there's like no engineers there. It's not like NAB where you can just sort of turn around and see somebody and end up talking about something interesting or unrelated or whatever until the show's over. Idea Bank is really the programming side, operations side, management side, and so being able to see from their perspective what is compelling, what their concerns are. Is really was actually quite interesting. You mentioned state broadcasting associations. Went to the Illinois Broadcasters Association convention in Bloomington towards the end of last year as well. And again, that was nice. Where it's not an engineering, it's not a technical conference by any means, and again, there's particularly less, sort of engagement than you might get at a NAB. But the conversations that we did end up having were quite useful. And in terms of being able to, you mentioned before the break, being able to bring, how do we convince, how do we explain our services and explain our value, and how we can help these stations. The existing folks that use us and that we serve are really our best salespeople, and the number of referrals kind of just grows exponentially from there as long as we do a good job. So recently, actually, we had a station out in Western Illinois, a group of stations rather. One of their operations folks left to go to a competing to a competing group in the same area. And that same day they left and went to the new group. We got a call from that new group's general manager and says, "Hey, this person says you're good. Can you come down and meet with us and do a technology assessment?" And we did, and it's been a great relationship so far. But that's the sort of thing where when somebody you trust somebody else, creates this kind of self-sustaining effect. So that's been nice. On the topic of mentorship, there's not new folks coming into the industry unless we bring them in. For years, a lot of the larger broadcast groups either sort of talked about doing it or did what they could to bring folks in, but obviously it's not quite enough to help sustain. And sometimes the pressures of the actual business environment make it impractical to have assistant engineers or to have people around that aren't strictly 120% necessary. We consider it our responsibility to take on that role, to bring people into the industry, and also to create a good environment for them to work where they're not on call 24/7, 365. Maybe it's 1 week every 2 months or 3 months or so. And that they have, as whenever possible, to whatever extent possible, reasonable working hours and get to go home at what would consider a normal time, or what their friends might consider a normal time for their office jobs, and to not expect people to have some sort of magical obsession with radio like some of us might have. That's frankly, it can be a bit unhealthy. But by making that a not part of the job requirement, and in fact almost trying to temper that, and not get people burnt out, that's how we've had some success so far, is being able to keep people on board and engaged.
Interesting. I like the way you say that, especially the an unhealthy obsession for radio. I love radio, and yes, sometimes I have been unhealthily obsessed. And I appreciate examples of people like you, Rob, and others who look, you can do this on pretty much 9 to 5 with only occasional excursions from that. Yeah, we have emergencies, but it seems like just as the years go on, I have fewer and fewer and fewer emergencies. We have more systems that are backup or more resilient. I don't know, but just have very few real emergencies. Rob, do you have any comments on this? You're not being mentored. You're on board. You're capable of mentoring. How do you view Inrush's responsibilities to the industry and to helping to train people who want to get that?
I sort of liken it to being a teaching hospital. I was really, really struck when I first stepped foot in the Inrush office in Chicago, the level of energy that was there, and the youthfulness of the staff that was there. And what is great about working in a collective of broadcast engineers at a place like Inrush is that you're not just taking young people in and kind of tossing them into the fire and letting them fend for themselves, which is really so often the best outcome that you can hope for in a station environment these days. There's just not enough people around to really, have people in a learning role. But at Inrush, we are able to maintain a high level of top tier engineers, and who then have a mid tier of engineer, the next rung of the organization, and then an entering and developing tier of engineer below that. And there is an advancement opportunity, and it's not necessarily a fixed place. I was really impressed hearing the stories of how folks who started with Inrush right out of college had learned different skills and really became very adept at doing certain things, in some cases, technologies that I am not particularly well versed in. And these folks that are brand new to the industry are doing so well with. The other thing that I was really impressed with, as somebody who's been around for a little bit, but not as long as some of our brothers and sisters in the industry, for the folks that are coming in without that tethering to how radio used to be done, there is this freedom to consider new approaches. that a lot of us, even if we've only been around for, I don't know, in my case, 25 years in the industry, they're kind of baked into our brain, whether we like it or not, and we have to like really actively let them go. Kirk, you're a bad example of this because you seem to be pretty free with adopting the latest and greatest new technologies, but not everybody is quite so liberated. And anyway, my mind was blown repeatedly at the number of different things that folks at Inrush had adopted to do one thing or another that wouldn't have been my first choice. And I quickly realized, hey, that wouldn't have been my first choice, but that's a better choice. And I'm kind of inspired being around that. So the idea of being able to operate in a collective and deliver that sort of teaching hospital experience where folks are not being left on their own to just kind of sink or swim and hope for the best, but be exposed to people who have strong experience, bring their own new experiences into the mix, and then collectively raise the bar in a way that we just really can't do in stations today. And I think that's what's so exciting about this model.
I like the analogy with a teaching hospital. That sounds pretty good. I was thinking, well, anyway, mine went some stupid places. Let's talk about we're going to talk about trends in the industry in our final segment, but balancing technology and teamwork. Can you guys think of some specific examples where technology really does help us do our jobs better and more efficiently and maybe with less stress and less worry? I mean, there's the whole working from home thing, and I don't know if that's going to continue or if it's kind of shifting back to come back in the office. There's plenty of voice tracking going on, and done well, voice tracking can still be a very effective way to communicate, especially if the station augments that with online personalities and, of course, in-person appearances whenever that's appropriate, and still having people who are in the community and part of things like, I don't know, the Rotary Club or the Chamber of Commerce or prizes and things that are out in the town. Balancing technology and teamwork. I don't know. Shaun, give me some examples of where technology or at least new ways of doing things just help people live a better life in their radio career.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a ton of them on the production side or on
Mm,
the talent side. Like you said, generally web-based services make life a lot easier for talent and for the folks that actually, produce content and the folks that sell the content. The fact that they don't need to be tied to the office or can work asynchronously in a lot of these new tools for like order processing and traffic
yeah.
management and billing and things like that. But given who the show is primarily for on the engineering side, the first thing that
Mhm.
came to my mind when you mentioned technology that can make our radio life better is something that we started using about a year ago or two called PagerDuty. It's basically an incident management system, and so the problem that comes up with anyone who is suddenly handling more and more transmitter sites, more and more devices, more and more alarms, and then couple that with like managing a whole team, is that the sort of incident management system that I grew up in the industry with. The fact that I'm still growing up aside, the incident management system was basically the Burp lady calling, and then maybe calling the next person, the
Ah,
next person. But as you can imagine, that like becomes pretty unmanageable at almost any sort of scale. And managing things like people taking time off, right? They shouldn't be getting critical alarms when they're on their day off or their week off or whatever.
mhm.
But previously you just still would get the alarm and you ignore it, whatever. And so, I thought back to one of my first mentors, Mark Spalding, in Champaign. I remember the first time he let me, while I was interning for him, carry the pager, the literal pager. And I it was a great system because you could literally hand it off to people, and it was really clear who had possession of the ball, and it was this device that would always ring, right? And so in setting out to find something that would replicate that experience, we landed on something called PagerDuty, and it's primarily in use by DevOps folks, who run these large distributed technology systems, and have different people on call for different things, different specializations. But the main thing it has is scheduling and escalation. So we basically throw all of our alerts into this system, including when actual humans call if they have an emergency. It all goes into the system, and then it makes decisions about what to do with the alerts. The on-call person gets the call in the middle of the night. As long as they respond to it and acknowledge it, whether it be via the app or text or by phone, you can still have the Burke lady, although now it's a AI voice guy, call you, and as long as they respond to it, it doesn't escalate. But if within 10 minutes they don't, it goes to one of the partners who's in a rotation on call, and then it goes to everybody. And so that way we can all sleep soundly at night, knowing we're not going to get woken up by things that don't matter because we've filtered a lot of those alerts out, and that things are going to be handled. And the alarm will basically get louder and louder, more or less, if they don't. So we can actually have SLAs and be able to feel good about meeting those instead of having this sort of random who's on first sort of emergency coverage. That sort of thing took some time to set up, took some energy to set up, for sure, and took lots of trial and error. But that and also is a pretty expensive system. But to us, that's worth it, even though we can't do any additional. It's not directly bringing in any additional revenue. It makes life sustainable for us and our staff, and so I think that's a great example of using technology in a way that makes life better, and that we can only do because we have this team and we have the clients to sustain it.
That's it's a wonderful example of a system like PagerDuty, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And I'm sure there's some homebrew things there's things you can do with VoIP phone systems so that the right person gets the calls when they come in, and there's other ways to get this done. Rob, in your experience, I want to hear from you before we go to our next break. What technologies or systems or websites or tools have you found along your journey in broadcasting that has made your life easier? And one thing I kind of heard from Shaun is that if you've got a system in place, when you're not on duty, you're not on duty. Somebody else is gonna handle it. Now, if it's something that they can't handle, maybe they'll call you, themselves. Hey, Rob, I really don't know anything about this, whatever, this Russian transmitter. Can you help me out with it? But it's nice to know that when there was always that anxiety of being on duty, probably you're not going to get a call, but you might. And it might be that one time when you finally got around to taking your wife out to dinner, and then you got an emergency. So, somebody else being able to handle that. So, Rob, what have you found that's been helpful to you in your career?
So, I mean, I'll talk about something broadly, but just to put kind of a pin in PagerDuty, what I think is an interesting thing to note about that as a concept is that is something that scale is able to enable. Shaun mentioned that it's an expensive platform and takes some doing to configure it. If you're a standalone station, even if you have people, that may not be immediately within your grasp. But for a firm like Inrush, well, we can sort of amortize that across the cost of doing business across many clients, take that into account with the fact that we want to be able to retain and continue to grow our talented team. And it makes sense to make that level of investment. And that case is not always there if you're there at the individual station level. Broadly, and this sounds, I almost feel silly saying this, especially today in 2025, but the level of remote access system that has just continually improved. There are so many different options out there right now that make machine access so easy. I mean, almost shockingly easy across desktop and mobile platforms. And being able to get into any single system, any single GUI, wherever you are, really just makes a heck of a difference. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I lived in central New Jersey and would need to get in my car and drive to the Bronx if we had a problem at WCBS on High Island. There was theoretically some better technology available then, but nothing like what we have today.
Yeah.
I had no way, aside from the Burke lady calling, to be able to get into those systems. Today, not only could we do that for one station here as Inrush, we can do that across our entire client base and be able to get pretty granular pretty quickly. Additionally, be able to collaborate on troubleshooting an issue by more than one person being able to see a screen at the same time, regardless of where we are. Again, something that is not necessarily within your grasp as an individual engineer at an individual station. But suddenly, when we start adding these resources and adding these people together, we really are able to get a sum that is greater than its parts.
I agree, and all the remote control that's available, and then putting consumer devices to work where it's appropriate, not everywhere. Um, I'm a big fan of the Wise cameras because they're just so cheap and they connect well, and you can get cloud recording for cheap. And right here is a view of Iraq at it's about 25 miles from here where I am. This is at Mount Haleakala. It's at 10,000 feet of elevation, and it's 4 of those Omnia MPX nodes feeding composite to 4 FM transmitters up there. And of course, we have other things that we can do too, but the cameras, just love it. Just makes it nice. Hey, it's This Week in Radio Tech. We're talking to Shaun Dolan and Rob Bertrand, now both of Inrush, and they provide really high-class, excellent services that they've thought about and tried at plenty of places, and they can look over your broadcast facility and do the same for you. I'm Kirk Harnack. Glad to have you with us on this episode of This Week in Radio Tech. We're brought to you in part by Angry Audio. And this is a great solution from Angry Audio. This beautiful little analog audio console that's so easy to connect. It's called the Rave console. It's now shipping. It took them a while, but it's now shipping. This console is really affordable, and I gotta tell you, it just feels great. It's heavy. It's not a little lightweight. It's a heavy little console. You feel like a real professional using it. It's got avionics grade switches throughout. The faders, the long throw faders, are just beautiful. They are silky smooth. The metering is so easy to see, even just out of the corner of your eye. You can tell that your levels are good, that they're correct. Of course, it has mix minus for codec and telephone hybrids. It's got microphone preamps in it, but it also has line level inputs and line level outputs. It's not a digital console. It's designed to be simple. It's designed to, it can be your control room console, but it can also be a production room, a talk studio, a podcasting studio. The Rave console this thing is just such quality. It's absolutely beautiful. You need to check this thing out. The Rave console from Angry Audio. You can get it from your favorite broadcast dealer. Get your discounted price from your favorite dealer that carries Angry Audio gear. Love this thing. Thanks a lot to my friend Michael Dosh. He's been on the show before, and he's a great designer, especially of beautiful analog circuitry. Thanks a lot, Angry Audio, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. We're also brought to you in part by Max Connect. Max Connect has a wireless division that gives you high-speed, prioritized internet data using, of course, modems like Cradlepoint and PepLink, but it's not just the modem. It is actually the SIM card and the service that they have arranged through different cell providers. But they also have this box called the U192. Because Max Connect, they look for places that need to be serviced, things in our broadcast industry where we really need a good solution. And one of those is the U.192. What is this box? Well, it's a USB connected, super quality audio card, but more importantly, it will put out composite, MPX composite, to go to your FM exciter. Now, you would use this if you are using one of these software-based FM audio processors, such as the Breakaway One or Stereo Tool or Omnia SST. And I've used all of these, love these things, but the problem has always been getting the quality of sound card that is commensurate with what you need to do FM broadcasting. Now, whether you are feeding an FM transmitter directly from the output of the U192, that works great. But it also works if you're feeding a composite STL system. So maybe you've got your processing, or you want to put your processing at the studio, but you've still got a composite analog or even a composite digital STL system to the transmitter site. Well, the U.192 box from Max Connect is what you need to interface between the computer running this FM processor and your 950 megahertz STL system, your composite STL. Works great. The box is actually designed and built by Angry Audio, but the concept came along from Josh Bone at Max Connect, and this box is absolutely beautiful. Make you sound great, give you the same quality as the most expensive boxes on the market in terms of the beautiful composite output. Thanks so much, Max Connect, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech and providing really innovative solutions for us as broadcast engineers. I'm Kirk Harnack. It's our episode of This Week in Radio Tech, and we're talking with Shaun Dolan and also with Rob Bertrand here at Inrush. Rob has been a friend for years, and now he's on board with the guys at Inrush. I think it's time we talk about trends in the industry. What industry trends are most exciting to broadcast technologists? What's looking good? And how can broadcasters prepare for a more virtualized future if that's part of this trend? Shaun, do you want to attack this question first about trends for broadcast engineers and technologists?
You talk about virtualization, and I think that would be almost anybody's first answer, and it truly is, right? It's basically, taking things that were previously appliances and putting them into software. So they can either be expanded and scaled, or so they can be made to be small enough to be affordable as well. So in either direction, it's super useful. So that's great. Rob can probably speak more to the trends, but I think one thing that's really useful is having somebody in your orbit or multiple people in your orbit or on your team that are maybe a bit more risk averse, and basically a foil to myself. I love a new shiny thing, and that's fun, and that can yield a lot of interesting yield a lot of interesting projects and improvements. But ultimately, it is useful to have people around you to say, yeah, but how is that really better than what we're doing now?
Yeah.
Or is this like short-term kind of shiny thing actually the end of the road, or should we just like wait a little bit longer and then take this to an even further degree? So having somebody around that has that sort of practical sense, not somebody who's just a naysayer for no reason, but somebody who's willing to actually engage in this sort of thing, and so having someone around to basically challenge you to provide additional perspectives that are usually different than your own, and being willing to have the conversation. And then likewise, yourself being able to sort of look inward and say, yeah, you're right. In this case, it's really not much better. It's not worth the extra lift just to do it because it's cool. And I suppose that ties back into the story Rob told about the USB sound card.
Ah, yeah, okay.
An Angry Audio
Rob?
device, no less. So I can't help but think about virtualization as I see you sitting there with a blue end deck behind you, which we now know is an endangered species.
Yes, indeed.
So impressive. I'm assuming you relocated that from another location to bring it to your new studio complex.
Yes.
One of the things that I have really enjoyed being a part of in the industry is the NAB Radio Technology Committee. And we've been talking about for a while now the need to deliver a virtualized, or you might really more appropriately say cloud hybrid solution for EAS, because of course the hardening of the EAS lies in the fact that it is a piece of hardware that receives audio over the air. But that doesn't mean that it can't be ultimately virtualized and combined into another appliance of some type, such that we might have multiple EASs available for a single station. We wouldn't generally spend the money to have. Now, you mentioned that you've got 8 stations there. I don't see 8 blue boxes, Kurt. That means that you are using that blue box to serve those 8 stations. And if that blue box goes down, well, of course, the FCC provides in their rules a period of time where it can be taken out of service. But what if you had a virtualized version of that blue box, and you had an issue with the code on one instance, and well, a patch was released, and you were able to apply that patch to the other instance, prove that it was good, switch that online, while you took the other one down and updated the firmware on it. That's something that we can do for just about every device in the broadcast plant today, but we can't do it for EAS. Not only that, but it requires boots on the ground. So if you are caring for many stations over a wide geographic area, and you need to physically visit every single blue box that is out there, not only is that an incredibly expensive and time-consuming proposition, but it means that there's a good chance that those blue boxes are not being kept up to date the way that they could if you were able to push out a virtual patch to each one of them and keep an eye on their health. So this was already on the agenda. It's certainly a loaded topic. There are some people that feel some really strong ways in multiple directions on this topic.
I'm
But
sure.
when Sage announced that they were going to stop making the blue box, because if I understand correctly, I think it's the microprocessor that is no longer available, which is kind of important. This suddenly changes the discussion a little bit, and don't know what Sage's next move is. They're not saying that we're closing. I am personally, just as an individual, not speaking for anybody else, just as an individual, I'm hoping that we're going to hear Sage say, yeah, we're going to stop making boxes, but we're going to help find a virtualized solution to this, because if that is unlocked, then suddenly we are able to move to a full virtualized air chain for our stations. And not only does that mean that it's easier to maintain, but that we can have more than one version of that air chain working, making it more resilient. And in the end, our audiences win. And if we're talking about EAS, really public safety wins, because if that physical piece of hardware is offline for a period of time, is it really better than if it was a physical piece of hardware that was sitting there, or if then it was a virtual piece of hardware that otherwise would have been online? I suppose that's a misnomer. No, not a virtual. You know what I'm saying. It's late here on the East Coast.
Let me give you speaking of EAS, one way that I have begun to think about the blue box, or whichever one you have, if you for those alerts that come in through the CAPS server system, and excuse me if I don't use all the right lingo here, but they certainly tend to work better, sound better, typically than the multi-station relay system. But when in the CAPS server system, that is to some degree virtualized, right? Because the CAPS server would be virtualized typically in AWS, and this is the local box that is the local part of that grabs that and puts it on the air. Am I thinking about that wrong or right? I mean, aren't we kind of partially virtualized by that system?
You're not correct, and I'll tell you, there's been some really. You're not wrong. We've had some very spirited debates based on exactly that issue. If we are to believe that CAP is functional and good, and that it serves the nation's security issues, why would we not apply the same thinking to the boxes that are downstream? And so I think that we are going to see movement on that. I do think that, again, speaking just as an individual, I really think that we're going to see movement on this year. Resolution, who knows? But I think that we will see movement there. It almost feels inevitable that this needs to happen, and it's long overdue. I mean, we're talking about a tech stack that was developed in the 90s, and we're still largely running, by and large, the same hardware that we were then. But your CAP analogy is dead on, and I agree with you 100%.
I guess if I understand correctly, that the National Weather Service is not on any such system. We still only get those messages from NOAA transmitters. Isn't that right?
That's correct, and that's actually
Okay.
there's some other backstory there that I don't know how much is in the public domain, so I'm not going to. It's nothing super exciting, but I know that there's a lot of spirited conversation around that as well, because the audio that most of us are able to receive from these National Weather Service transmitters is not terrific. So wouldn't it be great
Yeah.
if that existed as an option, so that in the event that the IP version was not available, that of course we had the over-the-air version, much like we do between the RF daisy chain and CAP. But wouldn't it be great if we had clean IP-based audio in the event that was, or most of the time when that would be available, and then in the event of disruption, that we had an RF fallback. It would just really go a long way in improving the alerting that we're delivering through the.
It seems like it's been 2 or maybe close to 3 decades since we first heard Perfect Paul, the really terrible automated voice at the National Weather Service. And these days we have AI voices that are actually pretty good, and you can you can train them well, and they can actually learn how to speak the names of the little hamlets and towns that are affected by the tornado warning polygon or whatever. It almost seems to me that now might actually be a good time to remarry weather alerting and some AI generated voice, because some of the generated voices are awfully good these days. And hey, I'd like for Morgan Freeman to tell me about the tornado.
Well,
Wouldn't
it'd
that
be
be something?
calming in the event of a serious emergency.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. It would be calming. Guys, we're going to run out of time here shortly, and speaking of EAS, I'm going to just roll into our last commercial sponsor message, and when we come back, we're going to have a fantastic tip of the week from both Shaun and from Rob. So stay tuned for that. And speaking of the EAS gear behind me here, yeah, we had the typical problem where we've got one Sage NDEC box or whichever EAS box it may be, and we've got 8 radio stations that we need to interrupt here. Six transmitters plus some HD, 2 HDs, and some translators. There's a lot going on. Luckily, being on Maui, one island, the coverage area, the alert area for all the stations is pretty much exactly the same. So we're able to interrupt all those at the same time. We do that with a box from Broadcast Tools. That actually the number of available multiple program interrupt boxes these days has dwindled. Several companies have quit building them. We've had a few of them in Mississippi built by Mark Persons. Well, we know Mark Persons, and we know he's retired now. He's not building those anymore. And there's been a couple other brands that have gone by the wayside as well. Some people pick them up on eBay and use those. But we got the new one from Broadcast Tools. Let's take a look at that if we can. This is the MSRP3. It's a 3-station analog stereo interrupt box from Broadcast Tools. It's an EAS alert insertion for up to 3 stations. So having 8 stations here, we've got 3 of these boxes to interrupt all 8 and plus a little bit left over. Insertion can occur independently or simultaneously on one or more station outputs, but alerts cannot be overlapped. Front panel test switches are recessed and they're jumper defeatable. Multi-turn front panel level adjustment trimmers for the encoder input and for the outputs. And the transparent signal switching via sealed mechanical relays gives you, they're gold plated, gold overlay. So these are always going to be carrying your audio, but they are always high quality. So this is the box you need right now if you've got multiple stations to feed the same EAS information to it. By the way, this thing is fully RFI proofed. It's really well built. You know how Don Wingett designs and builds his equipment at Broadcast Tools. It is the best built stuff, and these work just perfectly for us here at Akamai Broadcasting on Maui. I would encourage you to check out this from Broadcast Tools. It'll do you a world of good, and you can get them from Broadcasters General Store. Their website, it's very useful, is bgs.cc. It's got an easy search feature on it that works very well, or you can give them a call at 352-622-7700. I got to tell you, the folks at BGS do really good phone. They have all the information on a 2 or 3 computer monitor system right in front of them. The best pricing, the technical information, and the shipping and availability information has always been quick and easy. and pretty darn accurate from Broadcasters General Store. I love these folks. Been buying from them for 30 years. You know my stories about the late great Sam Phillips and his radio stations. Kurt, get them pretty girls from BGS on the phone. Let me order something. So BGS is a great company. I love them very much. Thanks, BGS, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, we're rounding out our program right now with a couple guys from Inrush Technology, and that would be Shaun Dolan and Rob Bertrand. Rob's been an engineer in some big markets, and so is Shaun. But Rob's just the newest hire at Inrush. Glad to see that happen. Looking for your tip of the week. So, Shaun, we've been hitting you up first the whole time. We'll just continue that tradition. What is your tip for us this week?
I want to talk about something called co-screen. It's essentially multiplayer screen sharing, and it's a really useful tool to be able to, work on stuff with other people remotely, right? So we talked about sort of mentorship and training. So being able to use this to do screen shares with people, where instead of both having to log into some sort of third utility computer or doing a sort of one-way screen share. It sort of does away with that. And it's called, they describe it as multiplayer screen sharing because it is a little bit gamified where you can see each other's cursors. It's bi-directional, it's window based, so you can see one window or multiple windows as if they were your own from somebody else's computer. You can annotate. There's a collaborative terminal, and it's really fast, way faster than Zoom or Teams. So it's actually a really pleasant experience to be able to, in real time, work with somebody else and provide remote access as a team of two or more, like Rob mentioned, but in a really slick package, and it's free to get started. It's from a company called Datadog, but co-screen would definitely encourage folks to try that out.
I'm looking at it right now, their website. It's an easy find, and they've got animated demos right on their website. This is great. It's beautiful. I've never heard of this. I will put this in the show notes. Co-screen, C-O screens, co-screen.co is the website. But if you're listening, we're going to put that in the show notes. You can refer to the show notes anytime at thisweekinradiotech.com. Oh, by the way, we're also on YouTube, so the show notes also appear with each posting on YouTube as well. And typically, we don't put the show notes on our Facebook postings, but you can click on the Facebook postings. Go to my website, thisweekinradiotech.com, or go to the YouTube posting. All right, thanks for that wonderful tip, Shaun. I really like that. Rob Bertrand, boy, that's a hard act to follow. What do you have for a tip for this week, Rob?
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be all that impressive or not, but I'll give it a shot. So one of the things I'm really excited about going into the world of Inrush is that I'll get to leave the sole domain of being in broadcast engineering management, and well, I'll still be doing some level of that. Also get to go back into the field again, which is something that I've missed. And for the last, whatever it was, 15, 16, 17 years, of not really getting to install things, I would get my installation fix at home. And so I have to admit, I have an absurd amount of data cabling run through my house, mostly Cat 5e. And especially over the course of COVID, I took to pulling that much more because, I mean, what else are you going to do while you're in quarantine but, pull an unnecessary amount of cable through your house? And I enough times I would forget to label the cable, and then would need to go and get a toner and probe and go and chase it. It's like, well, this is just isn't. There's got to be a better answer. And so I found this device from Klein Tools, which maybe you've come across before. And the idea is that they sell these little what they call test and map remotes. So there's a little RJ45 on the end of it. If you're running coax, there's a coax on the other side of it, but they've got numbers on them. And when you plug it in and you plug your cable in to the display, it's going to run through and check all the conductors and make sure that they're in the right order. But it's also going to give you a number and a cable run length. And so I went all out using Amazon points, and I got the 8 remote set. So I could pull up to 8 cables and just plug these things on the end of it, and then when I'm terminating at my central point, I go and just plug them into the monitor, and it says, all right, well, this is the cable that you've plugged number 8 into, and number 7, and so on. and then actually take the time to properly label the cables. Not having to think about labeling and putting numbers on and writing them on the box, and oh man, I cut the number off of that cable before I meant to, didn't write it on the other piece of the cable. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that makes those mistakes, but I feel like I make them often enough. When I found that these things were available and literally readily available from Amazon to the point that I could use my Amazon rewards points to treat myself to a silly cable tester so that I could run an absurd amount of Cat 5e cable through my house. I did not splurge on Cat 6. It just made me a happy boy during the pandemic for sure.
Now, the bigger device, is that the Scout Pro 3 tester? Is that what that is?
That is the Scout Pro 3 tester.
Okay.
Very good eyesight there.
That's so serendipitous that you mentioned this as your tip, because I just got introduced to that same product this week from Russell Lafferty, who's here with me, and we were doing a little bit of cable testing to find out what was working, what wasn't, and he used that to tone out. We rented an office suite here, and we didn't know where cables went to, and he's used that extensively to prove, okay, these cables are here, these are there, and now they're all labeled. So great! That's I didn't even get what he was using. Now I know. And it's affordable. I like this thing. Good job. Okay. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Shaun. We got to go. Suncast has to go. He's done a great job, and we appreciate Suncast you very much. Thanks to Shaun Dolan. Shaun, I should ask if folks, if broadcasters want to get in touch with Inrush, where would they find you guys, and how would they get in touch?
Hello@inrush.net is a pretty easy one to remember. It's all over the website. Shaun@inrush.net, Rob@inrush.net. I don't know if Rob has realized this yet, but you can actually, anything that doesn't actually exist at inrush.net is forwarded to all the partners, which has resulted in some hilarious aliases being created in the past. So notice I'm now sharing this with probably too many people. But yes, you can, anything at inrush.net, anything your heart desires, will get to us.
So Rob, the new guy at inrush.net, will get to somebody.
That would work.
Yeah. Okay.
This is scary that this is now out there in the world, Shaun.
You never know what's going to get typed. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We do have to go, and I appreciate so much your insights into the industry, into some of the, this new collaboration that is available. Not all that new, but it's becoming more popular because it's important for broadcast engineers who are overwhelmed or just have too much to do, and for broadcast owners and operators to get the most efficiency out of their broadcast operations, which is really important these days. Thanks again to Suncast for producing our show. I'm Kirk Harnack. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.